Mr. Sanjin Soldatic, Chargé d'Affaires, Delegation of the European Union to Trinidad and Tobago, Ms. Miriam Itka, Resident Coordinator and Interim, Office of the United Nations, Resident Coordinator, United Nations, Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Halim Brizan, my statistician colleague, Director, Regional Statistics, CARICOM Secretariat, Professor Aldry Henry Lee, my academic colleague, and Pro-Vice Chancellor, Graduate Studies and Research, the UE. Staff of the University of the West Indies, specially invited guests, our online audience, the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It gives me great pleasure to stand here this morning and commence the launch of the opening of what is dubbed the massive online course on gender analysis of prevalence and administrative data as it relates to violence against women and girls in the Caribbean. This is a long-awaited course, and I want in particular to thank the European Union, the EU, and the United Nations through UN Women for their commitment to this program of work as it relates to the scourge of violence against women and girls in Caribbean societies, and all efforts that are spared to ensure that the scourge is controlled, regulated, reduced, eliminated, eradicated, whatever word we choose to use. So before I go further, I wish to state that the campus principal of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, Professor Rosemary Bell Antwine, and the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences, Dr. Akula Lewis Cameron, were unable to grace us with their presence today. Obviously, these are very busy people, and there were other items on their weekly agenda, and it so happened that our event coincided with their activities. So unfortunately, they have been unable to join us. Nonetheless, they have sent their blessings and goodwill toward the successful conduct of today's proceedings, and indeed the success of the series of training that we here in Salisis will be hosting and conducting on behalf of the kind graces that have been sent our way through a collaboration with the European Union and the United Nations, in particular UN Women. So through the EU and the United Nations, of course, the conduit being UN Women, we are pleased that we have the opportunity of leading and hosting this very important course, the massive open online course on gender analysis of prevalence and administrative data. Some people refer to it as the MOOC, and we are very pleased to be associated with this venture. So having made these opening remarks, I would just want to say a bit about Salisis and what Salisis is about. And Salisis was established in 1999, specifically to conduct and engage in graduate research focusing on development studies in Caribbean societies, and indeed the Global South, because we do have interests beyond the Caribbean and in particular the Global South. So we trend our research in that direction. We also engage in training. We offer Master of Science programs, MPhils and PhDs in areas of development studies. We do have an MSc in development statistics, and I think the latter is the one that really endeared us to this program and made us a worthy choice among those who would have had an interest in conducting this training. We also engage in consultancy activities on issues pertaining to development studies. And if you were to go to the website, whether it's Salisis Regional or Salisis St. Augustine, you will actually be pleased to see all of the formal engagements that Salisis has been involved in over the past 2 years and more. So Salisis is very active. We are the think tank, the go-to think tank when one is interested in policy-relevant research in areas akin to promoting and advising on development agendas in Caribbean societies. We pride ourselves as an experienced bunch of academicians, scholars, and researchers who possess the tools to realize the aims and objectives of programs such as the one we are launching here today. And insofar as we are engaged in training, I cannot help but reflect upon some of the more important engagements that relate specifically to training and capacity building in the Caribbean region, training initiatives that Salisis has led. And I would start with the in-service training course for statistical officers in the Central Statistical Office in Trinidad and Tobago. Salisis played a major role in leading that training initiative on at least 2 occasions. And it's not just the statisticians and the statistical officers in the CSO who would have been trained through that model of training. There have been times when the training had been extended to our brothers and sisters in other Caribbean countries. Even more laudable has been Salisis's engagement in capacity building in the area of demographic training, training in demography for demographers and statisticians across 19 CARICOM countries and associated territories. And between 2006 and 2009, annually, there were representatives, trainees from various government departments, national statistical offices, the wider national statistical systems in all of the 19 CARICOM countries. In some instances, some countries had at least 2 trainees. And the training was conducted right here in this room where we have gathered. And over those years, and in particular, a training initiative that we conducted in Ocho Rios in Jamaica, again, but together, of course, with colleagues from the Department of Sociology, Social Work, Psychology on the Mona campus. I have to say it was a collaboration. We do have that engagement where we facilitate wide and varied training. And beyond that, we have also participated in training, particularly social workers, those engaged in development policy agendas within offices and departments such as the Ministry of Social Development. We have facilitated their training as well, bringing to bear a quantitative set of skills akin to quantitative research designs and emphasizing their importance to development agendas. Certainly, violence against women and girls dovetail with many of the sustainable development goals that we can think of, and getting it right in terms of pursuing progressive choices is consistent with assisting in terms of addressing some of the main goals associated with some of the sustainable development agendas that have been set. So when I think of this training that we are administering, and of course the participants who will be participating as trainees, I think, we have done a good job in attracting the 60 plus trainees who have signed up for the 2 cohorts of training that we expect to administer. In fact, when we wrote the proposal for the training, we did set a maximum of 60. And just, it's not as though, we went out there and said we were selecting 60 persons. When the pendulum hit its mark, in terms of those who declared interest in the program, it stopped at 60. Hopefully there would be more, and we have indicated if there are more who indicate an interest in the training, given what we are about, we shall extend the training to meet their needs. But as of now, we have 60 trainees over 2 cohorts that would span from March 2023 to June 2023. We are pleased with the program we have developed, and I am sure as I would return later on in the program, I will tell you a bit more about the training program and the various modules that are to be presented to these trainees. By and large, they cut across virtually all of the English-speaking Caribbean countries, and again I will tell you more about that when I return to speak about the course in particular. What is heartening to me is that I have worked in this area and toiled with NGOs, international organizations, government departments across the Caribbean as far back as the year 2000. And I know the trials that each of these organizations, has faced in trying to overcome the scourge of violence against women and girls. And what is so important about this training is that it is targeting a set of persons who are going to be the architects of the information that would inform policies and strategies geared toward achieving those noble objectives linked to the goals of the training itself. It's about capacity building, and I think what we have seen in the past is that as you come across persons from various agencies who provide these services, each one of them comes with different standards of training, standards for conducting data gathering, and that in and of itself is a threat to the validity of the data that we would eventually have at our disposal. A program such as this one will actually overturn that problem and ensure that there is greater harmony, greater standardization in the process of generating information to serve the needs of those who champion the progressive ideals that we set in combating the scourge that is known as violence against women and girls. So having said that, I think, I'd like to end my welcome to everyone. And of course, thank you for your attention. So at this point, I think it is my duty to begin chairing the proceedings. And I would like to begin by inviting a number of persons who are slated to deliver opening remarks. And the first person on my list is Professor Audrey Henry Lee. As I said before, she is the Pro-Vice Chancellor, Graduate Studies and Research, the University of the West Indies. I would like to invite Professor Audrey Henry Lee to bring and deliver her opening remarks. Thank you.
This Institute of Social and Economic Studies services St. Augustine campus, the UWI, distinguished representatives from the European Union, United Nations, UN Women, and CARICOM, UE colleagues, course facilitators, and participants, good morning. On behalf of the staff and students of the UWI, I want to offer you a special welcome. I also want to congratulate the St. Louis Institute of Social and Economic Studies and UN Women on the launch of the massive open online course on gender analysis of prevalence and administrative data on violence against women and girls. Data presented on the UN Women website states that 1 in 3 women worldwide experience physical or sexual violence, mostly by an intimate partner. Women experience violence in all private and public spaces. There are, ladies and gentlemen, immediate and long-term effects of violence on women and girls. These include physical, sexual, psychological harm or suffering, even death for our women and girls. The pandemic increased women's vulnerability to violence and poverty. COVID-19 has thrown millions of additional women and girls into extreme poverty and further widened the gender poverty gap. The rapid global digital transformation also poses a great threat to women and girls everywhere as predators recklessly roam the World Wide Web. Caribbean governments have committed to uphold the right of women and girls to be free from violence through international agreements such as the Convention on the Elimination
Audrey Henry Lee. And as usual, your welcome and opening remarks are very welcome, and they are on point in terms of, what the university is all about and how the various graduate units, the IGDS, the Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies, come together, mix and combine to deliver the excellent programs that we do, and in particular, the facilitate capacity building the way we do. I want to move to the next on the agenda to deliver opening remarks, and he is Mr. Sanjit Soldatic, Chargé d'Affaires, Delegation of the European Union in Trinidad and Tobago. So I want to welcome Mr. Soldatic to the podium.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Dr. Godfrey St. Bernard. Thank you very much for your opening remarks. Also, thank you to Professor Audrey Henry Lee. I would like to extend my appreciation to share the opening remarks with my colleagues from the UN, Mrs. Archer and Mrs. Broadbear, who are virtually with us today. Also, I would like to greet my colleague from the CARICOM Secretariat, who is also virtually with us, all the participants online and in person, members of the media. Thank you for having the EU today, and it's my pleasure to bring remarks at the launch of this training. Every time representative of the EU delegation is requested to bring remarks for one of the many activities under the bilateral or regional Spotlight Initiative programs, we typically use the occasion to mention our generous contribution to gender-based violence. It is totaling €500 million worldwide, or €5 million of which was allocated to the Caribbean. On top of that, I will also mention that the EU is the largest donor worldwide, and that our delegations in the Caribbean have all received allocations for human rights to complement the activities of the Spotlight program within the respective countries. Today, however, I'm not going to focus on these details, but on something else. The organizers and other speakers will no doubt share information about the course itself, the importance of robust data management and gender analysis as strategies for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls in fulfillment of UN's SDG 5, which is achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Rather, I will simply use this occasion to plead with all the stakeholders present here today to stay engaged or to get involved if you are not already on board with the issues that the Spotlight programs are addressing. Get involved now and continue your involvement after the program have ended. The day after the program ends is very important, and all the days after the program ends. We have to continue our fight even when the program concludes. The only way that we will see a reduction and possibly elimination of family violence within our families, communities, countries, and the region is if we all contribute in some meaningful way. So how can we contribute? Let me remind you of some ways. We can prepare, enforce, and monitor policies and legislation to ensure that they remain effective. We can collect, collate, and use sex-disaggregated, timely data to inform our policies and programs and to monitor the success of our projects. We can strengthen our institutions to ensure that they have mechanisms in place for accountability and transparency when dealing with victims, survivors, and perpetrators of violence. We can work more on prevention of violence within our respective circles, whether as teachers, parents, community leaders, friends, or peers. We know better, so it is up to us to encourage and support everyone to do better. We can ensure that we have adequate services for all persons, including our women and girls who, because of gender inequality, culture, religion, or for other reasons, are the main victims of family violence. The vulnerable population, including migrants, the elderly, disabled, and others, who must also be afforded full access to the available services. And our men and boys, who, because of their vulnerabilities, are by far the largest percentage of perpetrators based on the available data. Finally, you can join or contribute to the various women and civil society organizations that are at work in the communities providing a range of support services. These groups need more resources, including funding, volunteers, and champions. I pledge today, on behalf of the European Union delegation in the Caribbean region, and specifically from our delegation in Trinidad and Tobago, that we will continue to support this issue of family violence as partners until we see positive changes. I also pledge on my own behalf that I will do anything I can to make a difference. Please join us all in making this long-term commitment. Thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Soldatic, for your kind words. And again, I want to reemphasize the importance of the support that the EU has brought to bear upon the commissioning and the actual hosting conduct of this set of training that we have already embarked upon in a way, but we are very thankful. Next, I wish to welcome as I said before, my statistician colleague, and congratulations to Mr. Brizan, who recently assumed the post as Director of the Regional Statistics Office in the CARICOM Secretariat. So our next speaker is Mr. Halim Brizan, Director, Regional Statistics, CARICOM Secretariat, and I shall invite Mr. Brizan to make his opening remarks at this launch. So, Mr. Brizan, the floor is yours.
Dr. Sinbernard, pleasure to be here. I stand on the protocol established. I wish all a pleasant good morning. I'm indeed honored to deliver remarks as Director of Regional Statistics on behalf of the CARICOM Community Secretariat at the launch of this important online course in gender analysis of prevalence and administrative data in support of the partnership between the UN Women Multi-Country Office for the Caribbean and the University of the West Indies, SALICIS, which of course is being supported under the Regional Spotlight Initiative. From the inception of the Regional Spotlight Initiative, born out of an agreement with UN Women and the CARICOM Secretariat, the Regional Statistics Program has been working in close collaboration to ensure the effective delivery of the various capacity building initiatives under Pillar 5. This pillar supports the development and strengthening of regional protocols and standards for of family violence data management systems to improve timely and cross-sectional analyses and programmatic responses at national level with the following results: that quality disaggregated and globally comparable data on different forms of violence against women and girls and harmful practices are collected, analyzed, and used in line with international standards to inform laws, policies, and programs. UN Women has been a close strategic partner of the CARICOM Secretariat over the years, especially in the area of gender statistics, as we have indeed enjoyed a synergistic relationship which continues to blossom in terms of the wealth of sex disaggregated data and gender-related statistics produced through the many timely and relevant initiatives. These include the development of the CARICOM Gender Equality Indicators, the conduct of national prevalence surveys on gender-based violence in 5 of our member states, as well as the work done to encourage the inclusion of the measurement of unpaid care and domestic work in the 2020 round of population and housing census, and identification and training of a regional pool of gender experts. The CARICOM Secretariat has been participating under this same Regional Spotlight Initiative in regional workshops and dialogue on the review of minimum standards, ethical guidelines, and protocols for the management of administrative data on violence against women and girls in CARICOM and the OECS, in the hope that the same can be finalized, documented, and approved by October this year. This massive online course, which aims at strengthening the institutional capacity of the Caribbean community's regional pool of experts and broadening the skill sets for the production, management, dissemination, and utilization of violence against women and girls, prevalence, and administrative data, can bring us a step closer to achieving the CARICOM Secretariat's mandate, which is to contribute to the improvement of the quality of life of the people of the community and the development of an innovative and productive society in partnership with institutions and groups working towards attaining a people-centered, sustainable, and internationally competitive community. This course also embodies the Regional Strategy for the Development of Statistics, the RSDS, as it contributes to advancing the strategic drivers of sustainable capacity development and gender mainstreaming, and thus promoting the overall mission of providing CARICOM and the global community with high-quality, harmonized national and regional statistics for evidence-based decision-making, research, the empowerment of people, and for the achievement of sustainable economic growth and development. The Standing Committee of Caribbean Statisticians and the CARICOM Advisory Group on Statistics have identified mechanisms that can sustain capacity building, such as the establishment of centers of excellence and the Electronic Caribbean Institute for Statistics Training and Research, the ESISTA. These mechanisms Salisis for this timely intervention, which is well aligned to our own regional strategy for the development of statistics. On this note, I want to encourage other development partners to come on board in making a meaningful contribution to the development of statistics in the region. For it is through these interventions can we truly realize the ultimate outcome of an efficient CARICOM statistical system that is responsive to the national, regional, and global development agenda, enabling a resilient community with sustained economic growth and development. I thank you.
I think she's online. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Brizan, for the breadth of your welcome and your welcome address and your opening remarks. And I think, again, you really hailed the virtues of a training course such as this MOOC. You spoke widely about the capacity building trust that is characteristic of the training, and you made reference to the fact that we have moved beyond talking about domestic violence and violence against women, where the focus has primarily been on administrative data, and we now have 5 countries in the CARICOM region that have actually conducted prevalence surveys to understand the dynamics associated with violence against women. And we would like to think that, there is that resident capacity across the region that would ensure that at least within the next 3 to 5 years, several more countries can get on board and provide us with the necessary ingredients to address the scourge that we recognize violence against women and girls to be. So thank you very much, Mr. Brizan, and we move swiftly on to Ms. Miriam Aitka. She is the resident coordinator ad interim, Office of the United Nations Resident Coordinator, United Nations, Trinidad and Tobago. I think she is online, and I would like to invite Ms. Aitka to bring and deliver her opening remarks. Thank you.
And a good day to everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, government and CARICOM representatives, EU representatives, UE representatives, UN representatives, members of the online course under the Caribbean Regional Spotlight Initiative, and specially invited guests. On behalf of the UN Spotlight Initiatives team in Trinidad and Tobago, and as acting resident coordinator, I am pleased to provide opening remarks to celebrate the launch of this massive open online course, a key deliverable of the Regional Spotlight program. The Spotlight Initiative is a global United Nations program with generous support from the European Union and represents the largest investment this region has ever received to tackle gender-based violence, and particularly violence against women and girls. The last 3 years of implementation have brought many lessons, solidified our partnerships with government, civil society, and regional institutions, and laid the critical foundation to address the scourge in our societies. As the initiative draws to a close this year, it is critical that our investments contribute to continuity in capacity development and training for sustained change at both the national and regional levels. This is precisely what this massive open online course, or MOOC, represents. This open course will provide practitioners across the CARICOM region and even globally with the tools and knowledge to securely and sensitively collect, analyze, and disseminate data on violence against women and girls in line with international and regional standards. While resource limitations have contributed to underreporting and limitations of administrative data across the entire region, making a true assessment of the scale and magnitude of family violence difficult to determine, notable progress such as the use of family health service in few countries has painted a GBV landscape and contributed to enhanced understanding of the associated risk and vulnerability factors, consequences, and help-seeking behaviors related to intimate partner violence and sexual violence in the Caribbean. This MOOC represents one further step to enhancing access to data to facilitate the development of programs and policies based on evidence and knowledge of what works and that truly consider the needs of the marginalized and underdeserved populations in our region. Enhancing the visibility of VAWG data explicitly ties into the 2030 agenda for a data revolution to spur sustainable development. Big data will contribute to evidence-based prevention approaches, improve access to quality and effective services, and support social norms change that is consistent with gender equality. The use of the MOOC exemplifies this year's International Women's Day theme, recently celebrated on March 8, Digital, Innovation and Technology for Gender Equality, and aligns with the priority theme of the recently held 67th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. Innovation and technological change and education in the digital age for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. Developing any MOOC requires a vast team effort, and having this project, spearheaded by UN Women, yet so firmly embraced by UWI Sir Arthur Lewis Institute of Social and Economic Studies, Development Statistic Program has been key to this success. We look forward to continuing to support our national and regional partners to strengthen their institutional capacity, thereby amplifying the regional data landscape, which ultimately furthers the anti-GBV agenda and the empowerment of all women. Thank you very much and have a wonderful launch.
Thank you very much, Ms. Edgar. And again, we do appreciate your reference to the gracious assistance and support we have received from the European Union, and we recognize as well, with thanks, the commitment and of course the support that has come through the various arms of the United Nations. So thanks to both agencies. Obviously, you reflected upon and demonstrated the wide reach of the MOOC in terms of its prospect for treating with the range of international declarations that have sought to facilitate development agendas, not only here in the Caribbean region, but globally as well. I want to move on to the last, but certainly not the least of our distinguished commentators who are bringing opening remarks, and she is Ms. Toni Ann Brodbar, Representative, UN Women Multi-Country Office in the Caribbean. Ms. Brodbar, The floor is yours.
Good morning. I regret not being able to join you in the beautiful twin island Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, but I do delight in this opportunity, albeit virtually, to share this space with our colleagues from the European Union, without whom this would not be possible, with the RC acting, with all of my colleagues from the United Nations, our colleagues from UE, Silices, and most importantly, with some of the region's renowned researchers, academics, and leaders in data management. This launch really could not have come at a better time. Following the 67th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, which was recently held from the 6th to the 17th of March 2023, and International Women's Day, March 8th, as well as many other key activities during the months of March, which we now call Women's Month. All of these activities address the global digital divide and the issues confronting women across the world in this digital and technological era. Our region's participation in this Commission on the Status of Women signaled the solidarity and commitment of our member states to advance gender equality and women's empowerment by working collaboratively, not only with our regional institutions across government, civil society, and academia, but globally, to close the digital divide and data gaps in our region, as demonstrated by the CSW outcomes. There's much further to go. We know that data plays a significant role in developing evidence-based prevention approaches and responses to violence against women and girls. And as a region, the Caribbean is not exempt from the many challenges faced by the data deficits and the digital divide. Our national digital policies and programs still do not quite adequately reflect the multidimensional and systemic integration of gender analyses, gender responsiveness, the targets, and disaggregated data collection required for us to be as adept in our response and prevention, especially on issues related to violence against women and girls. We're still unable to comprehensively safeguard the privacy not only of women's sensitive personal data, but also to address the harm and discrimination that sometimes the impact of new digital technologies have triggered amongst women and girls, men and boys in our region. But as always, hope is not lost. Our region has also had significant advancements in data management as a result of our collaborative efforts working with our partners, including the European Union, regional institutions, governments, civil society, academia, private sector, and other users and producers of data. And Caribbean women are at the forefront of the creation of these solutions. We were able to have a wonderful session with women across Trinidad and Tobago leading in data management, artificial intelligence, and a better understanding of how to apply this technology for sustainable development solutions. Now, UN Women is aiming to bridge the knowledge and data gaps on violence against women and girls in the Caribbean, and we're doing so in collaboration with our colleagues across the UN system. We've been successful in collaborating with the CARICOM Regional Statistics Program to support the methodology that allows us to produce prevalence data in this region. And to date, with colleagues across IDB, governments in our region, and the Caribbean Development Bank, we have produced prevalence data for 5 countries in our region: Grenada, Guyana, Jamaica, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. While we need more, what we now have is a centralized public knowledge repository in one place via the Caribbean Women Count website. Now, this is the vision that we have for the region, where standardized prevalence and administrative data is centrally collected, analyzed, and made accessible to the public and to decision makers so that we have evidence-based decision making. We've also supported the creation of knowledge products. And on our website, you can find the recently launched national study on the economic costs of violence against women and girls in Jamaica report, which was done again with the support of the European Union through the Spotlight Initiative. We also have Caribbean experiences with collecting data on violence against women and girls, and the research brief Intimate Partner Violence in 5 CARICOM countries, findings from national prevalence surveys on violence against women and girls publication. Now, this data generation is supposed to inform not only our policies, but our programs to ensure that they are evidence-based, targeted, and successful. Under the Spotlight Initiative, the recent gender-responsive budgeting, a tool for financing initiatives to address violence against women and girls regional workshop, which was held in Trinidad and Tobago as well in March, is another example of this. We take the research, we use the tools, and we assist governments in understanding best how to apply them to best serve people across our countries in the region. Now here, budget planners, analysts, and gender focal points were brought to enhance their analytical and technical skills so that they could analyze public expenditures in different sectors to address violence against women and girls. A regional session was also convened with senior leadership in finance, statistics, and gender equality from 9 CARICOM member states to improve their technical capacity to better understand and apply this tool, gender-responsive budgeting, for better practices in developing national budgeting processes. Now, the importance of all of this would really be flat if we did not have training in gender analysis. Gender analysis is critical to development work in instances where gender equality issues are not adequately addressed in regular analyses, where we are invisible. The work, for example, of women that we know has helped us through the COVID-19 pandemic and that has helped our world through development, if not sustainable, once we do not recognize it. If we don't have that gender lens, we can't be gender responsive. Now, this language is not new. This language is inserted into the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And these gender analyses help us better understand what constraints women, men, boys, and girls are facing, and where some of the policies that already exist may not be fully incorporating their realities into the design, which would support implementation and monitoring on impact that changes the lives of people. So these kinds of training on gender analyses, they allow us all to understand where people are, what they're doing, how they're relating to one another in a particular environment, and then the sex disaggregated data that can come through prevalence surveys and better collection of administrative data, all again, things that are happening as a result of the European Union's investment in the Spotlight Initiative. This supports a comprehensive approach to really understanding the differences and using this understanding to inform useful policy design and program implementation. Now this MOOC, I love the word MOOC at this stage, but this MOOC is of particular importance to us because we need to have professionals who understand the importance of this gender analysis, who are equipped with the knowledge and skills to effectively and efficiently apply this to better serve the people of our region. We're really hopeful that your participation in this MOOC can also create the opportunity to share experiences, challenges, make it better based on your better practices, on your lessons learned, on these critical areas on data management processes, which can effectively translate research into advocacy and action. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us some valuable lessons and reinforced the need for all phases of our interventions to systemically use gender analyses to establish baselines, track results, and impact so that we can effectively incorporate the implementation of policy and practice. What we're aiming to do under the European Union-supported, UN system-wide implemented Caribbean Regional Spotlight Program is to ensure that we add value to the work that is already being done. We strengthen our data systems and our capacities so that we manage violence against women and girls, so that we manage it in a way that acknowledges the ways in which this violence seeps out of our homes, into our communities and our countries. The data will help us understand why. We have adopted a coordinated and a holistic approach to it, and our region now has the opportunity for the first time to manage this administrative data ethically, efficiently, and transparently using a standardized system so that we're comparing, we understand each other and why these things are happening and how we can best prevent them from happening, and how we can best respond. With the development of these minimum standards for ethical guidelines and protocols for the management of administrative data, this MOOC will not only complement the standards, but will contribute to the reduction of this data deficit disorder, which has unfortunately affected our region. We are so grateful for the partnership with the University of the West Indies, I have to say my alma mater, CELICES, and the support received from the Caribbean Regional Spotlight Initiative to make this vision possible. Now, the way forward. While the Spotlight Initiative may end in 2023, the roots laid through this partnership, this unique partnership between the European Union and the United Nations, will be continued. United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, UN Women, MCO Caribbean, we will continue to invest in efforts that foster collaboration among stakeholders. So we're not working in silos, we're working together for greater impact so that we can ensure that qualitative research and quantitative research on women and girls' barriers to data inclusion, how we can better use technology to manage and measure violence against women and girls, and how we can ensure response is what it needs to be. When we take the excerpt from the CSW signed agreed conclusions, we're looking at the prevalence of technology-facilitated gender-based violence, understanding it, so that the lack of disaggregated data by income, sex, age, race, ethnicity, migration, status, disability, geographical location, and other characteristics ensure targeted policies and intervention. Now, it would be remiss of me to leave you today without expressing my profound gratitude to many individuals, including Mr. Halim Brazan, and organizations such as the European Union and the CARICOM Secretariat, for not only the generous investment, but the dedication to ensuring that we can advance our efforts to address violence against women and girls within the context of family violence. I want to thank Dr. Godfrey St. Bernard, Mr. Sheldon Warner, the team from UE CELICES, of course, again, Mr. Brazan and his team at the Regional Statistics Program within the CARICOM Secretariat, the United Nations Office of the Resident Coordinators across the region, and the MCO Caribbean team. You are the backbones and bedrock of where true collaboration and regional integration is going, has gone, and happens. You have shared our vision and continue to support this journey. I thank you. To our first cohort of students, I challenge you to apply your critical thinking skills throughout this MOOC and help us to meaningfully analyze the data sets, identifying the inequalities that exist between women, men, boys, and girls. Sometimes in our region we think, look at UE, women are graduating at higher proportions than men. This ending violence against women and girls issue, this ending family violence issue, is not only a woman's issue. This is an issue that really threads throughout our entire fabric of our society, where we see violence as a viable option in our intimate partnerships, in our most loving spaces, and in our communities. So it is only when we can truly integrate an analysis that understands where women and men and boys and girls are and why they are where they are and how they are relating, can we start to address the diverse and intersecting needs of women, men, boys, and girls in our societies. I wish you every success in the completion of this course. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tony-Ann Brodber. And again, I think having listened to your presentation, it really put the MOOC into context in terms of what is expected of us here in CELICES as far as the delivery of the MOOC and how important it is to facilitate, the aims of organizations such as the EU, the United Nations generally speaking, and UN Women in particular. And as I listened to you, I couldn't help but remember 2013, which means that this is a process that has been gaining momentum at least 10 years ago, certainly more. And I make reference to 2013 because 2013, if I'm not mistaken, was the year when I remember traveling to Barbados as the regional consultant working along with the international consultant, Dr. Johnson. And the task was really one to, look at the WHO template and see to what extent, through a consultative arrangement with statisticians from across the region and international organizations, how we could come together and actually develop a CARICOM model. Of course, the CARICOM Secretariat had a major role to play in that event as well, and we have seen the results of it in terms of the 5 country studies that have been done. And what we are doing here today is really building the momentum and ensuring that the capacity will continue to reside in the region to ensure that we can continue these prevalence surveys. They do not have to be annually, but at least if we can do them every 3 to 5 years, that will be a good step in the right direction. So again, Ms. Brodber, thank you very much for your usually insightful comments. And I think we have come to the end of the opening remarks. It took some time, but we got there. Now, as we move on in the agenda, it seems as though I have to switch my roles from being the chairperson to being the one who brings, the general overview of the MOOC. And I guess by now everyone who is here has some sense as to what, when we talk about MOOC, what we're talking about. And of course, we here in Salises had the task of actually developing the parameters of the training that constitutes the MOOC in gender analysis of prevalence and administrative data on violence against women and girls. And as I said earlier, there was a time whenever we met to talk about, and back then the catchphrase was domestic violence, we were talking primarily about administrative data that are held largely at bureaus of gender affairs, the gender affairs units in ministries responsible for issues pertaining to gender. And many of these units have hotlines, and a lot of use has been made of, the hotline data in terms of providing us with some approximation of prevalence. Of course, it has often been a poor approximation for all kinds of reasons. And there were talks about, well, we can think about, developing a central registry that would draw data from as many complementary sources as possible to tell us something about what's going on with respect to the dynamics as they pertain to violence against women and girls, domestic violence in some settings, and what have you. But still, there were limitations, and I think, when one thinks about best practice, the better practice, of course, was in the direction of conducting prevalence surveys. And as you have heard today, we have, in the Caribbean region, conducted 5 prevalence surveys and hoping for many more in years to come, albeit with the kind of capacity that we are building as a result of the MOOC. So, as I mentioned earlier, we went through the painstaking task of pulling together the MOOC, and what I can do is make some remarks about the aim of what we came up with. Clearly, we developed a MOOC that consists of several modules, several modules that range from, several modules that address the historical and contemporary movements in addressing gender and gender equality, violence, and the evolution of violence against women and girls in the Caribbean. That's the first module that we shall be doing. And of course, that module really brings home the essence of this training, which emphasizes a gender analysis and ensures that at the end of the day, our participants will have the grounding in terms of gendered analyses that are in keeping with gender mainstreaming and what is required as we go through the process in terms of all of the other modules. So that first module is actually very important in the scheme of things. Having done that, the next module looks at researching violence against women and girls in contemporary Caribbean societies. And it's really about undertaking research. Research is about enhancing understanding of phenomena, and in this context, the phenomenon is violence against women and girls. But it's not only about understanding, which is the kind of pursuit one engages in when one is embarking upon a qualitative research design. It's also about, gaining knowledge about, patterns and prevalence. And when we start to speak that way, we are more or less invoking quantitative standards to gain knowledge. In both instances, of course, we are gaining knowledge. And this particular module on researching violence against women and girls in contemporary societies, that module treats frontally with all of the philosophical, methodological, and other programmatic requirements that would inform how we engage the process of understanding and gaining knowledge as they relate to this particular phenomenon that is central to the work of the MOOC. The third module looks at concepts and definitions in the context of violence against women and girls and the data sources. And we cannot help but think about, what are the main constructs that are central to the work that we do? And what are the concepts that are linked to those constructs? Again, philosophically, how do we establish those linkages? And from the establishment of those linkages, how do those linkages facilitate how we go about observing? And even as we go about observing, we have to be mindful that, that emphasizes in many ways, bringing gendered lenses to bear upon how we go about observing. And it's not only about, that link between, concepts and constructs and how concepts and constructs lead us to the instruments that we develop in terms of the core questionnaires that we use in the prevalence survey and so on, but also where do we obtain our data? How do we go about it? Where do we obtain our administrative data? What are the processes underlying how we go about collecting data relating to prevalence? And what about qualitative data? Where do we get the qualitative data? How do we get those data and so on? So we will be talking about those things. And insofar as we develop that, of course, the fourth module will look at qualitative research designs. And from that, we move straight into administrative data systems, which would be module 5. And then module 6, insofar as we are talking about prevalence surveys, our emphasis will be upon the logic of survey research and VAWG. And that is important because prevalence surveys are predicated upon the logic of survey research designs, and we shall be dealing with that. And then the 7th module would incorporate in many senses, gaining knowledge about VAWG, conducting national surveys, national prevalence surveys, and that is going to actually be looking more concretely at everything we would have discussed before and how that features into the conduct of some of the surveys that would have been done in the region. And I dare say that one of our facilitators, he was a key architect in the production of the data and the conduct of the surveys that was done in one of the countries that did the prevalence surveys. And of course, making sense of data emerging out of prevalence surveys will not bear results if at the end of the day participants are not properly trained in basic statistical techniques and the analysis of statistical data, the interpretation of statistical data. And there will be a module on statistics. Of course, the statistics module will cover 2 sessions because we want to ensure that at the end of the day, you do not only have the capacity to collect the data and to assess the quality of the data and produce the data, but you also have some sense as to how to analyze the data, embracing proper standards associated with the technicalities of statistics, and more importantly, interpreting what those statistical data are suggesting by way of messages. Too often, we have people who produce statistical tables and statistical charts and diagrams and misrepresent what is conveyed, not only by virtue of how they present those charts and diagrams and tables, but also what they consume from those charts and diagrams and tables. So we intend to deal with those issues to build expertise and ensure that the crew of trainees are in touch with the proper tools and the proper technical inputs to ensure that the outcomes and the results they produce are as valid as they can be. And once we start talking about statistics, they will have a taste of using SPSS, which is a statistical program for social sciences. But more importantly, we feel that because SPSS is such a costly program, we want to also introduce them to R, which is a statistical application that is you can download it free of charge and work with it. And so we also have sessions. So our 9th module will look at building capacity using SPSS, understanding data files and manipulating data files. And then once you get a taste of that, then naturally it would follow when they end up doing the 10th module, which looks at data analysis using R. As I said, R is much more accessible than SPSS. And so those are the 10 modules that will be done by the trainees. As I mentioned before, across the 2 cohorts, one of the cohorts has already begun its training. That training started, I think it was on March the 27th, and will go until the 17th of May. And the second cohort will start sometime around close to the end of April and go on until about the 12th of June. All the training sessions would end with presentations, group presentations by members from each of the cohorts, and these group presentations would really constitute an amalgam of all the skills that they would have gained during their training. And of course, when they make their presentations, they will be graded and so on. So that gives you a sense of some of the preliminary aspects of the training that we have envisaged. I think by way of the training, insofar as they have been trained, it is intended that they will be evaluated. There are various forms of evaluation. We feel that this is a very serious effort, and the university, at the end of the day, in collaboration with EU and the United Nations, will be issuing certification for participation, successful participation in the MOOC. So those trainees who would have successfully participated in the MOOC would receive a certificate of successful participation. Those who were not successful but have attended sufficient course modules would obviously receive a certificate of participation, not successful participation, but participation. And the evaluation is really broken up into 5 assignments. One is an essay, which is going to really look at that first module that looks at the gender issues and how they play out in violence against women and girls, and treating with the historical and more contemporary issues that arrive in the context of gender analysis, generally speaking, and in the context of violence against women and girls. There will be an essay on that. That is worth 10%. Then there's a multiple choice quiz for modules 2 to 8. There is going to be the third assignment is a statistical analysis, very small exercise using SPSS, and then the fourth assignment, a similar one using R, and the fifth assignment is really a group project where each of the cohorts will perhaps be broken up into 5 groups of 6 participants, and each of these groups will have a task. Again, a relatively similar task with a problem, and given the problem, what is the critical answer you want to get at, and how you can use the principles of research to come up with that critical answer, and what does it mean for action that is to be taken, and so on. So that's the general gist of it, and we shall be preparing that. Of course, the sessions that we have would take the form of seminars, group discussion, group presentations, breakout room chats, and computer lab sessions. Okay, so that gives you somewhat of a sense as to, what the content of the program is all about. Now, for the facilitators, there are 5 facilitators. The first of the 5 facilitators is Professor Paula Morgan, who she has been in the past University Director of the Institute of Gender and Development Studies in UWI. She has since retired, but she is an outstanding scholar with interest in gender for development and gender issues, generally speaking, gender mainstreaming. And she also has had input into the production of research items that have focused on violence against women and girls in Caribbean societies. Next, we have Professor Corinne Bailey, who had been associated with Salises. He is a criminologist, an outstanding Caribbean criminologist, and also an outstanding research methodologist, emphasizing method and making contributions in the area of qualitative research methodologies in particular. Third, we have Dr. Amanda Thomas, who is a young Trinidadian, recently minted PhD, who is also a research methodologist with strengths in quantitative as well as qualitative research methodology, and also prides herself, because of such capabilities, as also having a very direct and strong orientation towards mixed method research. She's also a specialist in as far as delivering training internationally with respect to using R as a statistical software, and she will be the one delivering R, and she also has made contributions to other parts of the training. Fourthly, we have Mr. Joel Joseph, who is an outstanding young statistician. He has engaged in a number of consultancy activities and contributed widely to, the conduct of research in a number of topical areas, whether drawing on qualitative research designs or quantitative research designs. But his profile has been one that emphasizes in many ways his strengths as a statistician, as someone who engages in survey research, and he actually his consultancy firm was actually commissioned to conduct the bulk of the work that was done for the prevalence survey that was done in Trinidad and Tobago. And finally, yours truly, Dr. Godfrey St. Bernard, and I am a demographer statistician by training. I have been the coordinator of the MSc Development Statistics in Salises, and it's a program that is allied to capacity building to ensure that the region will always be better off for having persons with quantitative skills and having that capacity to make strong contributions to development policy agendas wherever they may be. And I myself have had a deep immersion in work related to trying to understand the dynamics associated with domestic violence, looking at administrative data systems and coming up with mechanisms to overcome some of the shortcomings they possess. I actually have a book chapter in a book that has recently addressed the issue, and I continue, as I said, to support a lot of the work that is done, including the prevalence surveys. And I've actually supervised a number of our MSc Development Statistics students who have actually used the prevalence survey data for some of their countries. So in that regard, I think I too, like my other colleagues, are well poised to lead this exercise, and I consider it to be a formidable team of 5 facilitators who will do our best to ensure that we deliver valuable service to all stakeholders in this regard. So, having said what I had to say about the facilitators, I'm just left to say a few things about the trainees. And as we said before, there are 60 trainees who have actually registered for the MOOC. It's quite possible we may have one or two more, I'm not sure, but we'll have to have a discussion on that and entertain them in cohort 2 if necessary. But we are quite happy with the fact that we started working with 60 and without having any influence on it. Oh, 60? Yeah, so there are 60 trainees, and they spread from, they come from many countries in the Caribbean, right? Of the 60, 36 of them come from 3 countries in the Caribbean. So it's a bit skewed in a sense, but the region is represented. So you find 16 of the 60 trainees come from Guyana. 10 come from Trinidad and Tobago, and 10 come from Antigua and Barbuda. And other countries represented by smaller numbers would include Jamaica, Barbados, Dominica, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Belize, Cayman Islands, the BVI. I think those are the ones I hit on. What is noticeable, though, is that there weren't any from some of the smaller Caribbean territories, such as Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, Anguilla. There wasn't anyone from Suriname as a CARICOM country, and there wasn't anyone from Haiti as a CARICOM country. So, and we saw no one from other countries like St. Martin and Curacao and so on. So there is some work still to perhaps reach out to those countries in the event that there are, further installments of this kind of training. But generally speaking, I think the region has been relatively well represented. Who are the people who are being trained? Well, I took a look at the profile of the trainees. When we made that call for trainees, we were not very rigid in terms of, asking for specific sets of qualification, except for the fact that we felt that you should have at least had successful completion of secondary level education. And I say this because I remembered in the past when I did this kind of work in Caribbean countries, going to places like Dominica, for example, you saw some very progressive women who worked in the trenches and were doing valuable work, but they perhaps had no more than a secondary level education. And I felt that, it is important to at least sensitize these women to some of the things that we are doing in the event that such women wanted to participate in such exercises. And when we look around, you can see some variation, but largely you have social workers from NGOs and the public sector. You have particularly from Antigua and the Bahamas. Oh, I forgot the Bahamas. The Bahamas is one of the countries as well. From Antigua and Barbuda and Bahamas, you have mainly police officers. So you have a few police officers. You have statisticians from national statistical offices. This was particularly the case of Belize. You have journalists. You have medical records specialists, health information system specialists. There were lawyers, attorneys at law from Jamaica and from Guyana. Quite a few teachers who perhaps also develop as guidance counselors and so on in school settings. And the list goes on. So that gives you a sense as to who our trainees are. And based on what I've seen so far from the 2 sessions we have had with them, they are quite eager, quite keen, and very willing to engage discussion. So to end up, I will just make a quick statement on the aim of the MOOC. And one of the aims of the MOOC is to draw from and facilitate the technical training of a massive army of personnel interested in and willing to support efforts to positively redress the scourge of violence against women and girls in Caribbean societies, subject to training that would enhance their gender sensibilities in data collection and the conduct of formal analytical and interpretive procedures in the conduct of such research. That's one of the aims. It's a mouthful, but it does capture in many ways one of the things we want to do. We want to empower practitioners, allied professionals, activists, and other technically inclined persons to collect, process, analyze, and interpret administrative and prevalence data on violence against women and girls in the Caribbean. And in that regard, some of our trainees, I forgot to mention, we do have some trainees who are university students, recent graduates from development studies programs, and so on. So what I said there would apply to them as well. Thirdly, to reinforce the importance of sustaining administrative and prevalence data on violence against women and girls in the Caribbean, and ensuring that human resources exist to fuel the data and research needs that are essential in treating and overcoming the scourge of violence against women and girls in Caribbean societies. And then, lastly, to highlight the power of collaborative ventures in realizing progressive development agendas that thrive on unique partnership strengths of SALISIS as an international leader in open online training, and the UN Women and the European Union as international development agencies. And I think that is evident from what everyone has said. So, having said that, I think and I hope I have informed you as much as I can about what the MOOC is about by way of an overview. And I think I would have completed my end of the contribution to the program. So next on the agenda are two cohort expectations, and what we have done Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Thank you very much, Mr. Soldatich. Okay, all right. So, yeah, so we have two students, or I should say two trainees, who are part of the current cohort. Ms. Cindy Antoine Lafayette and Ms. Ania Mejia. We have two trainees, so we will get cohort expectations from the two trainees. Ms. Cindy Antoine Lafayette is a police officer as part of the vulnerable person team in the government of St. Lucia, and Ms. Ania Mejia is a statistician too in the Statistical Institute of Belize. So let's begin and invite Ms. Cindy Antoine Lafayette to deliver her expectations.
Vulnerable Persons Unit, part of the St. Lucia Police Force. I would like to adopt the protocol that has been established. I'm honored to be a panelist on this presentation. I was motivated to join this course, to apply for this course, because my work entails dealing with persons that has experienced sexual abuse, domestic violence, both women and girls, men as well, but we focus a lot more on women and girls. So having seen the application for the course, I said, why not? That's a good opportunity for me to be able to learn more on violence against women and girls, and so that I could apply myself more in my field. Therefore, my expectation for this course is for me to gain knowledge, skills on data analysis, be able to conduct research in a way that will get me to understand the different reasons why violence against women and girls occur, the history about it, and to be able to help persons, my organization, my country, St. Lucia, and of course, most importantly, victims of violence abuse for male and women and children. Sorry. So far, we have had 2 sessions. The first session was with Professor Paula Morgan, and that was very interesting, very informative. We looked at a definition, of course, for gender-based violence. We looked at the various forms of violence against women and girls, physical and verbal, and also other forms of violence against women, women and girls. We looked at the basic tools for gender analysis. We also delved into the importance of quantitative analysis as the basis for understanding violence against women and girls. We participated in some activities which was very informative. It allowed us to show what we had learned, and that I really appreciated that. The second session was with Dr. St. Bernard and Dr. Thomas, and that was very informative. That session we delved into quantitative, qualitative, and mixed method analysis, and we looked at the various steps in conducting research. We looked at the methodology, we looked at the aim of the research, we looked at research questions and open-ended questions that would allow persons to express themselves and not just giving answers as to yes or no. And we also had activities which allowed us to demonstrate what we had learned. So it has been very informative thus far. I look forward to continuing and successfully completing this MOOC, and I wish everybody the best, and I know that I will put my best into it as I'm very interested in that area, and I'm hoping that everything that I will learn by the end of this MOOC will contribute towards helping persons, women and girls, who go through violent abuse. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cindy Antoine Lefeuillet. And I now invite Ms. Anya Mejia, statistician to Statistical Institute of Belize, to make her comments about cohort expectations.
Thank you all. As introduced, my name is Anya Mejia. I am from beautiful Belize, and I am employed as a statistician at the Statistical Institute of Belize. I was interested in this MOOC because it will provide new understanding on the characteristic features of attitudes, behaviors, perceptions, and prevalence of violence against women through learning how to analyze collecting data using SPSS and R. In particular, I'm interested in modules that will cover the data structures, data manipulation, and analysis of differential statistics using SPSS and R, which I have not really used as much. Thus far, we have explored the historical and contemporary motives behind violence against women, provided by Dr. Paula, and thereafter, we began to explore the basics of research, including in particular discussing quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods research design. I truly look forward to learning something new during every session that we have and my expectations for the future of the course is that I believe this MOOC will be useful in assisting with properly training and providing relevant skills and information that can be utilized in the event of any future survey on violence against women, especially if it were to be conducted in Belize through the assistance of the study. Thank you very much.
Yes, many thanks to Ms. Cindy Antoine Lafouille and Ms. Anya Mejia. We are inching closer to the end, and I am thankful for that. And before I invite Ms. Akila Doris to come to the podium, I just want to take the opportunity to personally thank my Salises staff for pulling off this event today, right? I want to thank Mr. Sheldon Warner. In particular, Mr. Sheldon Warner has been a critical pillar in ensuring that this event is as successful as it has been today. So my heartiest thanks to you, Sheldon, for your contribution to this. But in addition to Sheldon, he was ably supported by Ms. Katian Modest, Ms. Elsa Hamilton, Mr. Ephraim Thompson, and also Mr. Leslie Brewster may have had some contribution to make as well, and I want to echo that. Quite apart from the Salises team, I want to also send my usual and gracious thanks to Ms. Josanne Green, who has always been a pillar supporting Salises big time, and Salises cannot be what it has been over the past 2 years, and Salises cannot be what it is now appearing to be by most people without, the input of Ms. Green and her team in the marketing unit, marketing and communication in UE St. Augustine. So again, my heartiest thanks to Ms. Josanne Green and her colleagues and team at marketing and communication. Having said that, I don't want to steal any more of Ms. Doris's thunder, and I want to invite Ms. Akila Doris, Planning and Coordination Specialist, UN Women Multi-Country Office in the Caribbean. Ms. Doris, please.
Thank you, Dr. St. Bernard. There is more than enough thunder to steal, so it's quite fine. Please permit me to stand on the already existing protocols. I think it's good day now, right? I think we're way past morning, so good day to those joining us here in the room and those online. It is indeed a privilege to bring these closing remarks on this very important occasion, as we've heard for the past 2 hours or so. I, on behalf of the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women, as we know, UN Women, and the entire MCO Caribbean team, friends from the European Union delegation to Trinidad and Tobago, and the Barbados and OECS officers and special guests who've been here with us today. And on my own behalf, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to all the speakers for the demonstration of the benefits of what true collaboration is. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation to Professor Aldry Henry Lee, Pro Vice Chancellor of the Graduate Studies and Research, University of the West Indies, for starting us off today with very encouraging words, and particularly promoting the great work being done through the IGDS on gender justice, ensuring that there is a zero tolerance to gender, any form of violence and sexual harassment within the university. Further, we're grateful to Mr. Sanjin Soldatic Charge d'Affaires ad interim from the European Union delegation to Trinidad and Tobago, for his kind words today. And I think one of the things that we can take away is a quote that says, "Stay engaged, get involved now." And I believe our speakers have all echoed what will happen or what should happen beyond the life of Spotlight. And so we do not anticipate the work ending, but rather accelerating beyond Spotlight. We're very grateful for the generous donation, well, investment, I should say, of over 500 million euros, quite a considerable amount being invested within the Caribbean only. And I want to assure our colleagues from the European Union that we've already started to reap the benefits. We've already started seeing progress from this investment, and we would be more than happy to report on a wider scale at the end of the Spotlight initiative. I would like to express our sincere thanks to Mr. Halim Brazan, Director of the Regional Program Statistics, who represented the CARICOM Secretariat, the CARICOM Community Secretariat this morning, and really re-emphasized the commitment to driving this process, driving advocacy for robust data management systems within our region, and helping us really to close the digital divide and address the data deficits within our region. And we've heard about the many processes that this has been done through. We've also heard about the collaborations between the CARICOM Secretariat as well as with UN Women. And we remain committed to continue supporting this regional integration platform. I also wish to express gratitude to Ms. Miriam Ector, Resident Coordinator ad interim from the Office of the United Nations Coordinator, United Nations Trinidad and Tobago, for re-emphasizing the UN's commitment to supporting at the national and regional level to ensure that no one is left behind. I'm very grateful also to our very own representative, Ms. Tony-Ann Brodba, from the UN MCO Caribbean Office, for her leadership on the Spotlight initiative across the Caribbean, and reinforcing the importance of training on gender analyses, not only in development work, but also on critical areas in enhancing data management processes. Ms. Brodba left some very encouraging words with us and reminds us that the roots laid from this very important EU-UN Spotlight initiative will be continued. We will not continue working in silos, but we will continue working together. And so we're all inspired by your great words. Finally, I take this opportunity to place on record our hearty thanks to Dr. Sin Bernard, Mr. Sheldon Warner, Ms. Josanne Green, and the power team from UE Silice's Marketing and Communications Department for the perfect, and I quote, perfect logistics and technical support they've provided towards this hybrid launch. Mr. Chairman, everyone joining us, an event like this could not have happened overnight. The wheels started rolling months ago, and as you would agree, strategic planning and a bird's eye view for details was necessary. And in this process, we've been fortunate to be led by our very own Deputy Representative, Ms. Isua Iyahen, and our very own A-team of motivated and dedicated colleagues from the MCO Caribbean, who continue to rise above and beyond challenges as we embarked on this very important program, the Spotlight Initiative. Once again, I would like to state that we're almost grateful to the students in the first cohort of this massive open online course who've embraced this journey and will now add to the repository of experts in the field of gender analyses of prevalence and administrative data in the Caribbean. We thank you for being here with us. It's been a great pleasure. Do enjoy the remainder of your day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Akila Doris. And I think we have found ourselves at a point where we can close off today's proceedings. And there was just one other member of staff I ought to thank, although she isn't here. I think she would have assisted today. That's Ms. Sita. Yes, I want to thank our helper who really had a contribution to make with respect to setting up the tables and so on this morning. So my heartiest thanks to Sita as well. So at this point, I want to bring today's proceedings to a close and thank all those who have been here in attendance virtually and physically for being here and staying the distance. Thank you very much all. Have a good rest of the day.